Got a wonderful panfish fly to tie for you today. This is called an SMP. It was created by a gentleman by the name of Skip Morris. And SMP stands for the Skip Morris Panfish Fly. It's a simple pattern to tie. You can tie a bunch of these up real quick in different colors, different styles, different sizes, but it is an excellent little panfish fly. I like to tie this in a fluorescent orange. The original just had regular orange flat wax nylon, but I like the fluorescent colors. They're a little brighter. I'll also tie it in a red using the yellow with red Marabou and red body. There's a version that I tie in pink and white for white bass in the springtime, and there's also an all-white larger version that I tie for smallmouth bass, which has just been a really good fly for me. So that's the SMP. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll start tying our SMP by putting our hook in the vise. This is a Mustad S82. The older numbers are 3906B. This is in a size 8. I tie these for the panfish. I tie them anywhere from 8 down to a 12. For the smallmouth, if I'm going to tie a smallmouth version of this, I'm going to tie these in 4s and 6s. And I'm going to attach my thread. For thread, I'm using a UTC fire orange for this one. The original fly used a flat wax nylon orange. This is in a 210 size, is what I'm going to start with. I'm going to attach my thread right behind the eye of the hook. And we're going to tie in our dumbbell eyes here. And these are tied in like so many others right up front. You want to have an eye length right behind the eye of the hook, and that's an eye length from behind the eye of the hook here to the cross piece in the dumbbell eyes. That'll give us just the amount we need in front right here for making the head of this and finishing it off and putting a whip finish in. Don't want to leave too much room up there. This is pretty close to the eye of the hook. Put in a few cross wraps, some wraps under the dumbbell eyes like this to secure it, and we'll get that nice and secure. Now you can put some lead wraps on this if you want behind the shank, or you could even use regular dumbbell eyes, leaded dumbbell eyes, if you want to add a little bit more weight to this. But the original just used the Beadchain eyes. At this point I'm going to go ahead and put some head cement on those cross wraps. This gives it just a little bit of security down inside the head of this fly to help hold it in place. Once I have the dumbbell eyes secured, I'm going to take my oval tinsel. I'm using a Danville size 14 gold oval tinsel on this particular version, and I'm going to secure that on the back of the hook shank right behind the dumbbell eyes. Now we're going to lash that down to the hook shank while we build our body. This is the reason I'm using a 210 thread on this, because I'm actually going to use the thread to create the body of the fly. Wrap down the hook shank and just go slightly over the bend, and then I'm going to come back up the hook shank with touching turns. You can flatten this thread out if you want to make it just a little bit smoother, but the last step on making this body, we're going to go ahead and flatten that out. So at this stage I don't worry about it twisting up a little bit. I do want to make certain that I'm getting those turns right up next to each other so I have a nice smooth body. If you prefer, you could use a floss for this. You could even dub the body if you would rather have something a little bit chunkier, something a little bit that looks a little bit meatier maybe. Something has a little bit more flash to it. Once I get to the end of the hook shank for the second time, now I'm going to spin my bobbin counterclockwise to flatten that thread out. When I flatten the thread out and then I start to wrap forward, I'm going to try and get each wrap just covering up a little bit of the previous one, and what you'll see is that the thread will actually fill in the gap between the twisted thread, and it just flattens it out and smooths it out a little bit more. And I wouldn't worry too much about getting it really, really super smooth, because in a moment we're going to put some UV resin on this, and that will be there to protect the threads against, and the mylar tinsel against the teeth of these fish, as well as protect against your forceps. So get nice touching turns all the way up to behind the eye. Trim away any little flyaways that you have. At this point I'm going to turn the fly over, and then I'm going to wrap my oval tinsel up. I only need about 5 or 6 wraps of this. It's up to you. You could put in a little bit more if you want, but I'm just trying to give it a look of a little bit of segmentation. I'm going to hold it on the underside of the hook like this across the Beadchain eyes, so I can bring my thread right around the top like this to tie that in. The rest of the fly is all going to be tied in and finished right behind, I should say right on top of the Beadchain eyes right there. Once I have that secured, I'm going to cut away the waist. I'm just going to put a couple more wraps in there to secure that. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a 2-turn whip finish in here, and I'm going to cut away the 210 denier thread because I no longer need it. I'm going to switch that up. At this stage I'm going to go ahead and use some Solar Res thin formula, and I'm going to apply this to the body. And what that will do is, like I said, it will help protect the thread and the mylar tinsel against sharp little teeth, as well as your forceps. Because this is a panfish fly, you'll find that you'll get a lot of panfish that will really engulf this. They'll take this in, and they won't get hooked just on the outside of their mouth or right on the inside, but down in the throat. So you'll have to use your forceps often to remove the fly, and the forceps can tear up the mylar tinsel as well as the thread pretty quick. This is a thin formula because I'm just wanting to get a little bit of protection on that. I'm not wanting to really build up the body on that. We'll hit that with our torch. Traditionally, this was tied, or I should say created with using epoxy, like a 5-minute epoxy or 30-minute epoxy, which you could certainly do. The UV resin just makes this a little bit quicker. The other advantage of the UV resin, a 5-minute epoxy will start to turn colors. It'll kind of get a brownish tint to it over time. With the UV resin, you don't have to concern yourself with that. So now I'm going to switch my thread up to a 70 denier, same color in the UTC. Also at this point I like to take the hook out of the vise and turn it upside down rather than just turning the vise upside down, and you'll see why in just a second. I'm going to reattach my thread right across the dumbbell eyes, the Beadchain eyes. Now we're going to tie in our wing, which is on this fly. It's made of Marabou. This is just a blood quill Marabou. We're going to use a yellow and a fluorescent orange to go with the fluorescent orange body on this. The Marabou needs to be just a little bit past about a half a shank length past the bend of the hook. Problem is that Marabou can be rather difficult at this stage right here to work with, to tie in there. So what you want to do is you're going to want to wet this down. It just collects it and brings it all together. What I like to do if I'm tying a bunch of these is just have a dish of water right there that you can just dunk this in a paper towel to kind of get most of the excess water off. Once you have that done, you'll have all those fibers collected really nice, and it's very, very easy to work with and to get this tied in. So I'm going to measure this about a half a shank length past the bend of the hook, and that's going to be my tie-in spot. Now I could cut the excess off and just tie the ends of that in, but what I have found is that it is much easier if I just lay this right up on top, and then I'm going to take a couple of gentle wraps just to secure this down to the fly between the dumbbell eyes. This way I can move this around a little bit, and I can get the cross section right there where those wraps are at, right on top of the bead chain eyes. Once I have that in place and where I want it, I can put it in a couple of tight turns to secure it. The difficulty here is we're going to cut our excess off really, really close. We don't want these little fibers spreading out around the front of the bead chain eyes and basically making a bushy mess. We want those contained. So by doing it this way, they're real close to those thread wraps. Now all I have to do is just put in a few thread wraps to cover those up and secure it. This is part of the reason I changed up to the 70 denier. If I were using the 210, the thread wraps are going to build up pretty quick. And you can certainly use the 210 if you're more comfortable with that or don't have it, 70 denier, but I just prefer doing it this way. So I'm going to get a number of wraps to secure that, and this makes a nice platform for the orange that I'm going to tie in, but I don't want to pile that up too much because I still have more to tie in there. I'm also going to take, again, my head cement here, and I'm going to put just a little bit of a half a drop or so of head cement to soak down in there, and that's just going to help hold that marabou in a little bit better. I'm going to take my orange marabou and I'm going to tie it in. It's going to be the same length as the yellow. I'm going to do the same procedure. I'm going to set it right up on top, and I'm just going to put a couple of collecting wraps. As you can see, when I wrap that in, it grabs all of it and pushes it the other way. So this just allows me to start getting it tied in to the fly and still be able to move it around, get it exactly where I want it, like that, and then I can turn around and put in a number of wraps to secure that, and I've got that marabou exactly where I want it. I can trim off the excess here. And then all I'm going to do is put some thread wraps around to cover up all those butt ends and make the end of the fly, or the head of the fly, I should say. And here you want to be a little bit careful because, especially if you are using the heavier 210 denier, you can easily load up the head of this with too many thread wraps. And so I'm taking care to place my thread wraps. You can see I've got a little bit of marabou showing right there. I'm taking care to place my thread wraps right where I want them so that it's covering up the marabou and making the head and finishing it off nice. Once that's done, you can put a few wraps right behind the eye of the hook to help close up the gap behind the eye, make it look a little more finished. Put in a 4 or 5 turn whip finish. And as a last step, I'm going to take some more solar res. This is a thicker formula of solar res, and I'm going to cover up all those thread wraps around the marabou and the dumbbell eyes. This is going to help, again, protect the thread from sharp little teeth. It's going to make the fly a little bit more durable. It's going to add a little bit of weight to it so that it will sink a little bit more, gives it a little bit more bulk. You can certainly skip this step if you don't want to do this. You could put a little bit of head cement on there, or use the traditional epoxy if you want to. Just take your time with it. Just get a little bit of resin out at a time. This is also one of those steps where it's easy to overload this with resin. I do want to make certain that I'm covering up all the thread with some resin there. So all around behind the eye of the hook, all across the back, and around the two dumbbell eyes, Beadchain eyes I mean. Once you're happy with that, we'll go ahead and hit it with the UV light. Take a little bit of time to make certain that it's all distributed nice and even. It doesn't flow real fast, but it does move, so you can just take a little time rotating it around to make certain that it's nice and even. When you got it where you like it, then go ahead and hit it with the torch. Solar res is nice because it's not tacky when it's all cured. So that would complete our Skip Morris SMP. As I mentioned, there's a number of different styles of this fly that I tie up. I do a pink and white version for white bass in the spring. I use the silver lead dumbbell eyes for that to give it a little bit more weight. I tie this on a size 4 hook in the 3906B or in a 3366 with silver Beadchain eyes, extra large Beadchain eyes, or silver dumbbell eyes in a all white version with gold rib, and it is an excellent smallmouth bass fly. So that's the SMP. I hope you enjoyed it. Tie a bunch up, get out to your favorite water, have some fun. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and not only learned a new pattern, but maybe learned some new techniques and a few new skills. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button below. You can support Dressed Irons by hitting the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos are published. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Until next time, remember, it's fly time. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.